Hello and welcome back to Focus Atlanta. Thanks so much for continuing to watch. We're going to close out the show talking a little bit about fall trends in terms of your health. I'm here with Dr. Giamalva. Thank you so much for chatting with me. It's that time of year. We feel like maybe we've been through the worst of it, the RSVs, the flus, but I don't know. Is there more that we should consider?
So, not necessarily that there's more that you should consider. You've already listed some of the heavy hitters. Add COVID into the mix, add just the typical cough, cold, and regular symptoms that we might experience that don't test positive for those things. There's also GI illnesses that can be quite common this time of year. And all of it just boils down to we're indoors. Maybe the weather's a little cooler, so we're not spending as much time out in the open air and we're close with each other. And that lends itself to those illnesses spreading.
Is there something that we could do better, because we know it's coming, even before the year turned or whatever, we and during the holidays, during Christmas time, during
Right.
Thanksgiving, we kind of know we're leading up to that time period. Are there any preventative measures we should be taking?
Well, certainly for some of the illnesses, right? We do have the opportunity to vaccinate. If we learned anything during the pandemic, we knew that masking helps much better with certain illnesses than others. So if you're inclined to mask or interested in masking, if you're higher risk, if you have issues with your immune system, for example, if you're immunocompromised, very important to do so. Of course, hand washing. And if you're, sharing things like utensils around the holidays and buffet lines and things like that, maybe you're getting together as a big group, as a family or friends, just being cognizant of, using that hand washing technique and being as careful as possible about spreading your own germs, let alone getting germs from someone else.
Well, just so that we, make sure that we not cross all the T's and dot all the I's. A lot of people are wondering now, is the hand sanitizer working? Should we really be washing our hands? Can we do both? If we're not able to get to some water and some soap, can we use hand sanitizers?
Certainly, yeah. I mean, it's certainly better than nothing. I do think that some people are just exhausted of the idea of hand sanitizer, to be completely transparent. So it might make sense for you to just kind of alternate if you're just over it. Some people obviously get some issues with hand dermatitis if they're frequently washing, and they can have some really significant symptoms there. And so identifying really what's best for you. The other thing to consider is when you're hand washing, it's mostly about the friction of actually rubbing your hands together. And so some people are, adamant about making sure it's antibacterial soap. But the reality is the time that you spend and the friction action of actually rubbing those hands together is actually one of the more helpful components of washing your hands as well.
Okay. Can we also dispel some myths about RSV? There was a time where, in my mind, that was only for infants or only about infants. But now we're learning, nope, not necessarily.
Correct. And so we definitely see it at kind of the extremes of age. So it's transmitted amongst any and all ages. But at the extremes of age is really where we see it affect people the most. So infants for sure, and then our elderly population, both of which now have opportunities for things like monoclonal antibody treatments or, vaccines and ways to kind of decrease your risk of getting those infections. So it's very important if you are a parent of an infant, obviously the infants can't advocate for themselves, but if you're a parent of an infant or if you are helping any elderly people in your life, or you yourself are an elderly person, just making sure that you're having that conversation with your provider around what your options are to protect yourself as these seasons start to ramp up.
As we're thinking about the things that we want to do to make sure that we're keeping ourselves and our health and our families healthy, is there a place that we could go for tips, information, go on the web? Is there anything else that we could do?
Absolutely. So the CDC does have a huge repertoire of information. You're certainly able to access the CDC. Anybody in America can access the CDC. If you're engaged with a health system or with a local clinic, oftentimes they will have FAQs and websites to help align and kind of connect you with what's going on, especially maybe in your direct community. And so that can be really helpful, especially as sometimes there's different fluctuations throughout the country in terms of what's rising, what's not. And then don't hesitate to have those conversations with your provider. So if it's an urgent care provider that you kind of are accustomed to connecting with throughout the busy season of cough, cold, and flu, or if you have a primary care provider, just making sure you're staying in contact with them as they may also have those resources for you as well.
Dr. Giamalva, thank you so much for coming on Focus Atlanta and clearing this up for us. In closing, what would you say to people in terms of illness trends, fall trends when it comes to their health? What would be your closing argument, so to speak?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing to consider is that you do have the option to vaccinate early. And always, when those vaccines are available, is the time to get your vaccine. It takes about 2 weeks for that immunity to build up and to just think about not only yourself, but those around you. So it's one thing to say, hey, I'm healthy and it's fine if I get a cough, cold, or flu, but it's not the case for everyone around you. So always thinking of those in your family, your friend circle, and your community at large.
Thanks so much for your time. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Same.
All right, guys, we have the tips that we need. All we need to do is be a little proactive when it comes to our health. I know many of us are accustomed to waiting until we get the runny nose or waiting until we feel that scratchy throat. But there are some things that we could do to make sure that we don't get that far. Some of it's, a matter of vaccination. If you're worried about cold and flu season, make sure that you take all of the precautions that you need to keep yourself and your family healthy. Thanks, guys, for tuning in to this week's episode of Focus Atlanta. I hope to see you next Sunday here on CBS Atlanta.